Welcome to the Fight Like a Mother podcast. I am Cheryl Cardall, your host. You have landed in a wonderful community where we give non-judgmental support for parents raising kids with mental health and other neurodiverse challenges. My main goal is to provide resources and especially a soft place to land. Go find me on Instagram and join our awesome community of parents under my name, Cheryl Cardall. Now on with the episode. Welcome back to the Fight Like a Mother podcast. My guest today is Jessica Frew, who I am so excited to talk with, not talk about. But Jessica and I met via social media, but we've met in person. Is it just once, or have we met a couple
just
of times?
once.
I think it was just once at Charlie Bird and Ryan Clifford's wedding. And I was so thrilled to meet you in person because we've communicated via Instagram, and I've admired what you do for a long time. And I was like, I've got to have her on the podcast so we can chat. So I'm so excited for you to be here. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And this is like the good part of social media and the internet is that you do get to make these friends that then when you meet them in person, first of all, you're like, how have we not met in person before?
I know, exactly.
And then also built-in friends and genuine connections, and it's amazing. It's such a gift.
It is amazing. It is amazing. So, Jessica, I love your enthusiasm for life, and you are so fun to follow because you just exude this passion and happiness. And anyway, you're just such a breath of fresh air on social media that can often feel, I don't know, like drudgery. Sometimes for me, lately, social media has felt a little bit like drudgery. And, there can be lots of comparison on there and lots of, I don't know, it can just be a hard space, which obviously it has been for me lately. But I just seeing your stuff and watching you talk, it just is a really bright spot for me. So thank you for being that on social media for me. And I know many, many others.
Well, thank you. I love tackling real life stuff with just some levity, because even when it's hard, we get to embrace some joy and some lightness. And ideally we can laugh at ourselves when the time is right. But so that's my goal. And just help people to feel like your path's your own. It's okay. Embrace where you're at, who you are, what you're doing. It's all right. Everybody's path is different.
Yes, I love that so much. Well, why don't you start out and introduce yourself a little bit, and then kind of just dive right into your story and what brought you to Instagram. I know you've shifted a bit, but initially, what brought you to your platform?
And even with the shift, this is still what brought me to the work that I do today.
Right. Exactly.
It's all connected. So I'm Jessica Frew. I'm a wife, an ex-wife, a stepmom, a mom, and a bold action taker. And I really believe in getting to know and trust our gut and intuition and then taking action on that. I believe it is our greatest asset. It is the most underutilized. And it's something from a very young age, we are taught to not trust. We are the first person we do not trust. And so I help individuals come back to trust that so that they can make decisions with clarity, confidence, and concision. So that is the work that I do. And how I got here.
Can I ask you to repeat something? What did you say? We're the first person we're taught not to trust?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That just was like, whoa, it's so true.
It is so true. And it's something that I just recently pinpointed as I've working with all of these individuals, is at a very young age, we are taught not to trust ourselves. And it's done by well-meaning adults in our lives who are oh, you're fine. It doesn't hurt that bad. You shouldn't want to do that. Don't dress that way. All of these little things that it's very well meaning. And sometimes it's because the adults in our lives don't want to, it's triggering for them, for us to have kids to have big emotions. And sometimes it's just, they're trying to help us feel better. But in that, they're teaching us that we aren't safe to feel our emotions, that we're not really in pain. And so we start to question ourselves and not trust ourselves. So And then that amplifies as we get into teen years, and it's not just our parents and all of the things. And then we have social media, and it's just keeps going and going.
Yeah.
So yes, first person we are taught not to trust is ourselves. And so it's like I always tell people, I'm like, it's not your fault you don't trust your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your doing, but now you get to feel empowered to go back and trust that.
Yeah.
Now you get to learn how to trust that and feel safe in trusting that, and all of those good things. So yeah,
Well,
diving right in.
yeah, diving right in. No, I love that. And it's so true. And I think sometimes, I mean, I think as a grown woman, I didn't even know what my intuition felt like
Yep.
or my gut
Mm-hmm.
felt like. Because like you said, like we've been told to like push that away, push that away,
Mm-hmm.
push that away. You know, don't, like you said, don't dress like you want. Don't wear your hair like you want. You've got to look a certain
Yes.
way. You've got to be a certain way. And all those little messages are just like, and I think our parents do it, or parenting in general,
Mm-hmm.
is we think it's in the best interest.
100%.
And we think this is what a good parent means, or, you know, if our child does certain things or looks a certain way or whatever. And so it's also, as parents, we need to just take a breath and just allow our kids to be who they are.
Yeah.
So,
And to recognize that what they want is good and wonderful, and their feelings are information that are teaching them things about themselves. Oh, it's like so many layers, and it gets
yes.
me so not like fired up in a bad way, but excited because there's
Hmm.
something you can do about it. Well, once you
Right.
recognize it and see it, it's like, okay, this wasn't my doing, but this is where I'm at. And now I can take action to repair and fix and
Yeah.
connect to myself again.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
yeah.
it's our job to heal it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we didn't do it, but now it's our job to heal it so that we can also, because we can't give that to our kids if it's not healed within. So,
100%. Yeah. It's an interesting journey, and I've loved watching how I've grasped this concept more of how this has trickled down to my parenting,
hmm, hmm.
and how I've kind of utilized this now, and hopefully it's resonating with my kid. We'll see.
I know.
She's
I know.
14, so we've got some years to go.
Who knows? Who
Who
knows if what
knows?
anything we're doing is trickling down to them, but
Just doing our best, just like our parents
yes.
did with us.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. So my story
Hmm.
began
I love your
when
story, by the way.
thank you. I do too. I mean, and this is part of why I love it, is that like releasing some of the shame and the guilt that we might feel of carrying a story, because we all have a story.
Mhm.
And when we can embrace it with love, it changes the outcome for our life. So,
Absolutely.
um, I met my ex-husband in college. We were young, and were following the path we'd been shown. We were raised in very conservative Christian religion, and we were checking all the boxes and doing the things. He was a returned missionary. I was, at college waiting to find my partner and the things that you do. And we've been told are the right path. And I met Steve one day at a choir concert. I was a vocal performance major, and he came in with all these other girls, and there was nowhere to sit by them. So he ended up sitting by me. And I was like, okay, this concert just got better. And he and I like chatted when appropriate throughout the concert. And by the end, he was like, hey, can I get your number? And the next day, he called and asked me out. And we were together every day that we could be after that. It was just easy, and we had fun together, and we were excited to connect. And so as we continued forward, we met in February. We were married by December.
Mm.
And everybody talks about like the first year of marriage is so hard and all of those things. And it just felt right. Like moving in together felt good and all of those things. And I always say this, and then I have to remind myself, okay, there were some things along the way. So right before we got married, like the weekend before, Steve comes to me. He's like, hey, I wanted you to know before we got married that I have a pornography addiction. I've struggled with pornography my whole life. And I'm like, okay, I can handle that. You're still this man that I love and enjoy, and that doesn't change anything. So that's fine. And pornography in our religion was very much shunned upon. So I was
Right.
like this, but it just didn't matter to me. Like we've all got our stuff. And we continued forward. And then 6 months into our marriage, we were living across the country just for the summer. And I had opened up our laptop and was just doing some stuff on it. And at the time, there were pop-ups. Like if you had
Right.
searched
Yes.
something, pop-ups would start coming
Right.
up. And so all of this pornography started popping up on our computer. And I'm like, oh crap, like exit, exit.
Yeah.
I don't want to see this. But as I'm doing that, I'm realizing there are no women in this
Mm.
on these screens. Like there are no women inside. So then I was like a little bit curious. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Is this really what I'm seeing? It's all men. And I had at that moment this thought that, oh my gosh, my husband is gay. Like I know he's gay. I'm sure there are straight men that look at gay pornography, or just men, but I knew he was gay. And he came home from work that night and he could tell like I was upset and that it had been a day. And in that he knew what had happened. He's like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, well, are you gay? And he's like, no, I'm not gay. I just always convinced myself that it was better to look at women or not look at women, to look at men than to disrespect women. And so he continued forward and he's like, I'm not gay. And I'm like, okay. And I just like tucked that into the back of my head.
Right.
And I was like, okay, we're not ready to deal with this. We're not ready to process this. But Steve told me later, he's like, at that moment, it was the first time I let myself think those words. I am gay. I am gay. And he spiraled for like a solid 3 weeks of like very disconnected from me, very much in his own head of just processing through this fact that he had never let himself think. Years later, he's in counseling. The counselor is like, hey, the issue isn't all these other things you're dealing with. The issue is you're gay and you need to love and accept that about yourself. And so at that point in our marriage, he was able to openly tell me, I'm gay. I don't want to leave. Like, I'm happy with you. I want to have kids. And we were trying to have kids at that point. This isn't something I want like to leave. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'm good too. So we continued forward. We ended up bringing a beautiful little girl into our lives, like 5 years into our marriage. And then just before our 7-year wedding anniversary, Steve ended up having an affair with a man. And we tried to work through that. He was so conflicted. He's like, I thought at that point I would just be so disgusted. Like I would get it out of my system. It would be revolting. And I just would be done with it. And he's like, but instead it felt like the most right thing I'd ever done. Like, he's like, it felt so natural. Outside of the fact, he's like, that I felt horrible. I had done this to you. Like that it was going to impact you and our marriage and all of those things. Like there was that. And like these two very conflicting feelings here. So we continued forward for a little while, but it was just a mess. And we decided to get divorced. And in that, really kind of sat down and we're like, what do we want this to look like? You plan your life of how the marriage is going to look and what's going to happen and all of these things. And then you're like, well, crap. How do you do this now? Like nobody lays this out for you. And there's really only one version of divorce we've seen.
Right.
It's bitterness, anger, resentment, and kids not being able to have their parents at the same event without like worrying about their parents being in the same room. And I knew that wasn't what I wanted for Penny, our daughter. Like I was like, we can't do it this way. There has to be a different way. And we basically sat down and planned out our divorce in moments of logic, because there was a lot of emotion still going on here. Absolutely. I don't want to ignore that. There were nights spent crying all night. There were moments of anger and all of those things that come along with betrayal, having a partner come out, and all of these mixed emotions. But when we were in places of logic and calm, we would discuss like what we hoped this would look like. And the vision was that we both hoped for is first and foremost that any event Penny would want both of her parents would want us at. Like she wants both her parents there supporting her no matter what it was, that we could be in the same room and she would not have to think about us or worry about us. She could enjoy her time. And we could be there to cheer her on. And ideally, we have partners for both of us that could do that as well. And so that's kind of what we set out as our goal. Our daughter's now 14, which blows my mind. She was 2 when we got divorced. So we are 12 years into this process. And I am just so grateful to say that we are still friends and we do cheer each other on. And when Steve is struggling in his life, he will come to me. I mean, he is a partner now that is obviously the first person he goes to. But after that, we know we're each other's best friends. And it's been a journey. It's taken a lot of intention. It's taken a lot of humility and owning our own crap. But ultimately, we've been able to create this family that works for us. And I've been remarried now. It'll be 11 years next week, which blows my mind as well. And he genuinely loves and supports Steve as well, and Steve's partner. And it's just been such a gift. Not what I had planned for my life. There were a lot of things I had to release and a lot of identities that I had carried as this is who I am, this is what I'm going to be. You know, I'm never going to be the person that gets divorced, and things I had to release to be able to embrace what we have now.
Right. Right. Well, and I love watching your story because often you post videos or photos or whatever, and all of you are there. And it's obvious just from seeing your interactions. I've just seen it on videos,
Yeah.
right? Or pictures, but that there is genuine caring there between the four adults in Penny's life. And I can't even tell you how much I admire that, because that's not the typical thing, like you said.
Yeah.
And also the fact that, I mean, your ex-husband is gay, and like embracing that. And I'm curious what your thoughts were like when he came out as gay. What
Yeah.
were you like, oh my gosh, I can't have, did you ever have the thought, like, how's this going to affect our daughter? I'm sure, I know you had all those thoughts,
Yeah.
but like, what were your feelings about that when he came out?
Yeah. So when he officially came out to me,
Yeah.
we were in the process of moving actually, and he had already moved, and I was staying back to like take care of some things. So we were separated physically, not like we were separated in our marriage. But it was going to be like 3 or 4 weeks. And I think that was actually pretty great because I had some time to kind of process through on my own. And he didn't have to see the raw emotion of really accepting this. Like I said, I knew in the back of my mind he was probably gay, but I went and bought books of like what resources are there out there about when you have a gay partner, and especially within our religion.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of this. Like, what does this look like when you've been taught like this isn't, there's no place really for gay individuals. There
Right.
is, but not in the same sense as straight individuals within our church. And I remember reading these books and realizing, first and foremost, there was a very strong possibility my relationship might end in divorce. And also, there was, even if it didn't, Steve would most likely have an affair. Like the odds were just stacked against us that this was the reality. And I was staying at my parents' house at the time. And I just remember being up in the room reading these books and like sobbing at night and recognizing, okay, we still didn't have a child at this time. We had her later, but it didn't. The thing that kept coming back to me is, first and foremost, I knew Steve and I were meant to be together for some reason. Like there was no doubt in my mind that we were put in each other's paths for a reason. And also, it didn't, like at that moment really, I didn't think anything different about how he would be as a father. Like I still wanted to have a kid with him. I still wanted to pursue that because ultimately Steve being gay didn't change who he was. It
Right.
changed our relationship and the dynamic of it, but it didn't change who he was and the qualities that I loved about him. And so that part of it just kind of, it didn't faze me. I also knew at that point he hadn't had an affair, he hadn't been with anybody. Like, and I know a lot of individuals who, when they have this experience, there is a history of affairs that you didn't know about. So that's another experience.
Right.
So it didn't change Steve. It didn't change those types of things. But it was an emotional thing to work through because all of these things that we experience shift your relationship. Like my relationship with Steve at that moment wasn't the same. And even like when you told me about the pornography, like it shifts things. Like, okay, there's a different awareness here. This isn't what I planned. I have to shift how I view this and how I think of this, and kind of navigate that. But ultimately, him being a dad, like that didn't ever change for me. Like he was still the man I knew. He was still a good guy, and I wanted to keep moving forward with him.
I love that. There's something, phrase that I've seen on social media a lot, and it's talking about your child, but it totally applies here. It's like when your child comes out to you, they're the same person, you just have more information about them. And
Yes.
that's how it was with Steve. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I love that you were like, he was still the same person. He had all the
Mm-hmm.
qualities that you loved, that you fell in love with. You knew he'd be an amazing dad.
Yeah.
You just had more information about him now,
Yeah.
albeit that was tough information to have,
Yeah.
right? But it just helped you understand him better.
Mm-hmm. And there's this thing that happens for many individuals who experience this is now they're actually more connected to their partner
Mm.
because they know more about this person. There's like puzzle pieces that fit in your relationship. They're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense
Ah,
now.
got it.
And I felt so honored that Steve trusted me with that,
Uh-huh.
that I knew he loved me enough and trusted me enough to be able to disclose that. And I knew how scary it was for him. And I watched as, you know, we ended our marriage and we started telling people he is gay and how scared he was. And
Mm-hmm.
it still gets me emotional thinking about it, of just knowing he needed somebody that he knew was on his side. And this is why I think God brought us together ultimately, is because Steve needed somebody to have his back. And it didn't have to be me, but I knew I was able to do that. And he would always go back to, he's like, I knew, you know, there was anybody that should hate me and be angry and all of those things, it should have been me. It should. And
Yeah.
he was like, but you never did that. You just loved me. He's like, you had moments of anger. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
He could understand,
You're
but it
human.
was, yeah, but it was just like he knew I needed him here and that I wanted him here as Penny's dad. And which ultimately got him, he dealt with suicidal ideation for a while after we were divorced. And I would sleep with my phone on at night and I'd be like, you call me, I need you here. And he did several times in the middle of the night, just like, I'm not okay. These are the thoughts that I'm having. And I just like, please go home. I need you to call me first thing in the morning. He had a partner at home. Please go talk to him.
Mhm.
Um, if I don't hear from you first thing in the morning, I will be sending somebody to your door to check on you. And and so I'm just so grateful that I could be that person amongst all of this processing I was doing on my own.
Right. I think it's incredible that you were his person, you know? And it just shows me that just the love you had in your heart for him, and that he was willing. I mean, he had to be willing to work through all the
Oh
crap,
yeah.
right? I mean, both of you had to, like you said, it takes a lot of humility and um working on yourself and your own
Yeah.
healing to be able to be that person for this individual who, nobody would have blamed you, Jessica, if you had been like, forget it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want him around. We'll just do the bare minimum to have him in Penny's life. But I think it's incredible that you've been able to be that for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And Steve often makes it sound like I'm the great person in this relationship. I'm like, no, Steve, it took both of us to be able
Mhm.
to get here. It took both of us working through our stuff and setting clear boundaries in the beginning of our divorce. Because I always tell people, like, it wasn't always this easy
Mhm.
to be
Sure.
together
Yes.
and in community. It took time. It took very strict boundaries. Everybody has boundaries. Boundaries are needed, but like more extreme than what they are now
Mhm.
for us to be able to process through. And a lot of clarity of like, hey, today I can't talk to you.
Right. Right.
I need today. I will probably be fine tomorrow, but today I need it. And so recognizing that and honoring that in each other. So Steve gives me all the credit. I'm like, no, this goes both ways.
Had to be both of you. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and your your current husband, Matt, I mean, give him
Oh
some
my gosh.
kudos too, because he's just embraced Steve. Now, maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't like that when you first got married, because, like you said, it's been 12 years. Time
Yeah.
helps a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things, right? But like, give Matt some kudos, lots of
Oh my
kudos.
gosh. Matt has a way of loving people and like feeling things out, of just listening to their stories and trying to understand. And he also, we have a very different relationship with his ex-wife. And so he knew being able to be friends and have this type of relationship was huge and beneficial, and ultimately what he hoped for as well, so that we didn't have two sides of high drama. And he just really, he and Steve came together, and there were text messages that they sent that I didn't know about, of like, hey, this happened, I just wanted you to know, like things. Matt taught Penny to ride a bike, and Matt was like feeling so bad, but also didn't want Penny to miss out in the moment because his kids were riding, and like all these things. But they were able to put those things aside and just be like, we're all just doing our best to show up for this kid and for each other. And so, yeah, he's been amazing. And he's just a great guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just think, like you said, that level of respect that he would think to send the text to Steve, hey, I taught Penny to ride a bike today. Like, that's such a level of respect for Steve as the dad, instead of being like, you know, some people would be like, haha, I'm the one who got to teach her to ride the bike. And he was like, oh, Steve might have feelings about that. I want
this might be hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. And this is like, this doesn't happen because we're all amazing people. We have made a ton of mistakes. One thing that I do think we're really good at is just owning that, of like, hey, this might not have been great. And not just positive things like teaching to ride a bike, but like things that are said and like, hey, this isn't what I meant. I don't know what Penny's going to say about it, but I want to make sure you and I are clear, and I apologize for saying it that way or doing this thing. And also being very clear about what we want in the long run, not in this moment of when we're pissed and annoyed because they did whatever and things have happened. And it's just like, oh, he's late again or whatever. But recognizing this isn't a big deal in the long run. Like, let's focus there. We can express these things when it's a good time, not in the heat of the moment. We can have conversations around them, but ultimately really focusing on what we hoped for our family in the long run.
Yes. Yes. So important and so vital. And like, you all put Penny's needs first. I mean, for the best outcome for Penny would be, like you said, all the parents to show up to something. And I just love that you're like, I don't want her to have to worry about her parents. That's not her job. You know, her job is to go be a kid and enjoy playing in that soccer game or singing in that choir concert or whatever it is, whatever she does, or having both parents at her birthday party and not worrying they're going to have a blow up. You know, she can just enjoy having this joyful experience with her friends or with family or whatever. And I love that whole mindset of, it's not her job to deal with our crap. So let's make sure she doesn't have to do that.
Yeah. And that comes down, I know like a lot of parents hesitate to take time for themselves, to take care of themselves first. I'm like, this is what happens when you do take care of yourself first. I took care of my emotional, physical needs, mental needs during that time so that I could be the mom that could show up and let go of these things. It isn't about like just pushing through or ignoring it. It was about connecting to myself and taking care of myself first. So then I had the capacity to show up for Penny in the ways that I wanted to and that she needed, and all of those things.
Well, I love the phrase by Brene Brown that says clear is kind. And when you're talking about like this communication that you're doing, I'm like, that's exactly what you're doing. Like, let's set our intentions of what we want. And like, okay, I'm sorry, this interaction with Penny or this interaction with whoever didn't go as I planned. And I'm sorry about this. And she may say something, and, you know, just like owning your stuff. That's what you're doing, is you're like owning your stuff and being so clear, like, here's what we want. Here's the, you know, being clear with the communication, the boundaries, everything. I just think that's so vital.
That is like my favorite thing from Brene Brown. Clear is unkind, unclear is unkind, or clear is kind, unclear is unkind.
Yes.
And I always think of it in, you have to be clear with yourself first. You have to gain that clarity about what it is you actually want and need so that you can show up clear with the other person. And sometimes that doesn't even have to be stated of what it is, your boundaries or anything. Those can be things that you are navigating,
Yes.
because boundaries aren't about controlling the other person or telling them what to do. It's about controlling how you show up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not going to have this conversation. This isn't one that I'm ready to have right now. It might be something we can circle back to later, but I am not in a place to have this. Things like that, of just saying, and people might push, people might whatever, but you can walk away. You
Mm-hmm.
get that clarity. And there were moments, like I said, of that where I'm like, I can't talk to you today. Like, I am up in my own feels, and this isn't going to end well if we have this conversation.
Right.
I want to have it when I can have it in a positive way with you, or one that's productive. Today's not the day.
Yeah, I love that.
And that goes both ways, of
Mm-hmm.
recognizing, okay, when somebody tells me this, I'm going to acknowledge, like, I'm going to respect that, saying, okay, we can circle back.
Yeah, instead of feeling, no, you have to hear this right now. And,
Yep.
and I think that's the thing, coming from a place
Yeah.
from healing yourself, you're much more likely to be able to actually do that for somebody.
Yes, for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. I also, regarding boundaries is, I can't remember if it was a podcast or an article I read or whatever, that you don't even have to state your boundary to the other person. It's like an inner boundary of, I am not going to talk about this with this person, but you don't have to state that to them. You can just be like, if they try to talk to you about it or bring it up, it's like, that's not something uncomfortable discussing, but you don't have to state all your boundaries to people. It's just something, it's about our behavior, not theirs.
100%.
So I think that's important to acknowledge too, that you probably had internal boundaries that you're like, I didn't have to state it to everybody. I just knew myself, like, this isn't something I'm going to do or talk about or think about or whatever. So I love that. So how did this, I would imagine having a spouse come out as gay, we know it would have tons of feelings and whatever. How did you get from that point to being such a good ally for the LGBTQ community? I would imagine that's a little complicated, and some of the feelings are complicated.
It is very complicated. And for me, it was a pretty natural transition. Like, it came in waves of realizing what an ally I was, because I don't know that in college I would have categorized myself as an ally. Being in the vocal performance, the music program, there's definitely, you get a lot more diversity, which was great. I needed to see that. And also, some of it very negatively impacted some of my friends. And so I carried that, of like how I felt about that. But then having this person that I love so much and knowing who they were, I'm like, okay, I cannot generalize one experience, just as in any type of thing. We're all different. Everybody's different. And so understanding that I loved Steve and supported him helped me be able to see clearly of like, okay, like there needs to be space for people to be themselves, to love who they want to love, and all of those things, so that this doesn't keep happening to other people, so that they aren't in the space Steve was, so that I'm not in the space I was. And the only way to help make that happen is to be an ally, to be open and speak loudly about loving people for who they were created to be, who they were sent here as. And so that was how it happened for me. And I remember, like, Steve, when we were married, he very much felt he could pray the gay away. He was up that mindset. I need to do more. I need to be better. I'm not being obedient enough, and all of those things. And I watched him struggle with that, and me knowing, you will always be gay. Like, this is not something that's going away. This isn't something that's going to change, but you need to love this about yourself. And so that was more my mindset of helping him come to love this. Like, okay, I'm the straight one here, but I'm the one that's trying to help him love this part of himself and understand it's not going away. And so it took time. Like I said, it was kind of like a slow evolution of realizing my allyship and why it was so important to me. Now, women that I work with who are in my same experience, and sometimes men, like I mostly work with women though, when their partners come out, they're like, I am an ally. I've been an ally for years. And now I'm in this place where June hits and it's Pride and all these things, and I feel unable to connect to it. I don't feel safe being in that community. And I always tell them, it's okay to be an ally and recognize that right now it doesn't feel safe.
Right.
That doesn't mean you're not an ally. That means that this represents your life completely falling apart in this moment. and you can take the time you need to be able to show up in the way that feels good for you. Doesn't mean you're not an ally. They're some of the strongest allies I know because most of them genuinely love these men and or their partners. And so I'm like, you got to take that time to heal you, and then you can come back to this space where it feels good to be there or to show up in the ways you want to show up. It doesn't mean you're not an ally.
Mm.
It just means this represents something that was hard.
Yeah,
So I think when you can kind of separate that and not judge yourself, because most women are like, oh, but they feel guilty. Like, but I should be okay with that. I'm like, no, no, no. It's okay to have that space. So there's a definite delicate process that happens in being able to come back to being a full ally and to showing up the way you want to and speaking it out against it. It doesn't have to be right away.
Yeah. And I think there's so many different ways to be an ally. Like I did a
For
post
sure.
the other day that you don't have to fly a rainbow flag in
Mm-mm.
June to be an ally. You don't have to post on social media that you're an ally. Like it's just about loving people where they're at. And so I think that's the thing, like giving people permission to do this how it feels right to them. And so I love that you give them that kind of permission because sometimes I think we need that quote unquote permission from somebody else to be like, it's okay that you're having feelings about this right now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
100% okay. And you may circle back and be a full outspoken ally at some point, and maybe you don't, and that's okay
Yeah.
too.
You do
And
it in your
so
own way.
I love that you are, giving women that permission to figure out what it looks like for them. It doesn't have to look like it does for you or for anybody else. So
100%.
I really love that. And so let's shift a little bit and chat about like, holy cow, my spouse just came out to me as gay. My life is blown up and doesn't look anything like I thought it would. Now, that's not my experience,
Yeah.
but my life has blown up multiple times in my life that, wow, this looks nothing like I expected it to look like. Back in our early 20s when we're getting married and we're,
Mm-hmm.
having these kids, and we have this picture of what life will look like. And we know we will have bumps and things along the road, but we don't expect to like blow up in our face
Yeah. Yeah.
and have collateral damage of the shrapnel in our bodies and minds and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. So I want to just chat with you for a few minutes. What do we do now? What next? Like life is blown up. What do we do?
Yeah. I think for me personally, and a lot of the individuals I work with, it comes down to releasing our past identity and detaching our value from that.
Mhm.
Because as life blows up, that usually means something that we had envisioned and that was good in our life is now not what we had planned, and it's not what we had envisioned. And we make that mean something about our inherent worth and our value, which then sends us even deeper down on this path of carrying, anxiety and shame and guilt and like things that aren't serving us to be able to move forward. And so when we can release or separate our value from that identity, we get to feel empowered to now take on a new one. And there's a reason that I always put in my bio that I'm an ex-wife and a stepmom, because often those carry a negative
Yeah.
connotation. And I want people to know that that's something I'm proud of. Those
Mm.
are some of the things I am the most proud of in my life, that we've been able to make this work, that I've been able to come through as a stepmom and figure out my role there, because man, it's been a mess. But it's ultimately something I'm proud of at this point. And I was proud of all along, but I've had to embrace this identity and figure out how it works for me. So I think if we can recognize that we are still the same person, we are still of value, of infinite worth, and understand now how we show up in alignment for ourselves. Like, what is it that I want now? And I get to mourn and grieve the things I thought I would have. And also now I get to embrace this new reality
Mhm.
and figure out what I want. It's like Steve and I sitting down and creating this new vision of what we hoped our lives would look like based on our individual values, which many we shared the same of.
Right.
But just like, what do we want now? And understanding that if we're building blocks towards that of what we value and what we hope it will be, it doesn't matter if it goes exactly as planned. We know it's getting us closer to what we want. We still get to have the same feelings, the same joy, the same values, the same whatever, even though it's not going exactly as how we envisioned. We can still have all of that. We can still embrace those things along the way. So I think when we release that identity and keep our value intact, then we can say, okay, I am still empowered to make decisions. I am still empowered to live a life that is in line with my values, even though it doesn't look how I imagined. And I
Yeah.
get to mourn these things. And these things, like, there are still, like, every once in a while, there are still things that come up that you have to mourn. Like, I'm 12 years out from divorce, and there still might pop up a thing of, like, oh, this is what I'd envisioned doing with my nuclear family.
Yeah.
And it's not. But also, I get to have all of these extra people loving my daughter and here to celebrate along with me or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so I think when we learn to carry both of those and recognize we get to have both, that it creates this world that we can expand instead of just like get stuck in this hole
Mm.
where it's dark and it doesn't feel good in there instead of empowering ourselves to climb out of it. Um, and it really comes from I help people make decisions, and it really comes from deciding and taking action. Like, we just need to make this decision and we need to take action towards the next right thing. And then we see how that goes. And sometimes it's like, yes, this was the right way. This is going towards where you want to be. And sometimes it's like, oh, clarity of like, no, this isn't the right thing for
Yeah.
me. I get to shift now and go this other direction. And it's all just information. It's
Right.
not something we need to carry shame around or any of those things. We all have it's information and we take it and we utilize it and we move forward.
I love that it's simply information. Like, I think if we can like let go of things, I think a lot of us growing up in whatever culture we did or a religion that we did, it has to look a certain way,
Yep.
and that's for a variety of religions and cultures and things like that. But, you and I grew up in the same religion and culture, and, family's huge, and wanting it to look a certain way and portray it a certain way is big. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that when that kind of blows up and it's not that,
Yeah.
I do think there's that shame and guilt. And well, if I had been better, done better, been more
Mm-hmm.
righteous, read more scriptures, things like that, we could have kept it together
Yeah.
without taking into account people's choices and agency and circumstances, just life in general. I mean, and so I think that's so important that this is hard and you can embrace all the emotions. And what do we do next? And I love that you're like, take action, do something, and then figure out if that's the right spot. But it's just information. If it
Yeah.
doesn't work out, that's information. We need to try it
Yeah.
a different way. But I also love, because you had said something like release our identity and embrace what is. But you also had to give Steve the permission to release that identity of who he was
Mm-hmm.
and embrace what is. And I think that, like, when you said that, that thought came to me, and I was like, mind blown, because I think often we're willing to say, okay, I'm a different person, but are we willing to give that grace to somebody else,
Yeah.
whether it's our spouse or I have my three oldest children don't participate in
Mm-hmm.
church anymore.
Yeah.
Am I going to release of what I think they should be doing or who they should be and give them the permission to explore that themselves? It's hard.
I,
It's not easy,
yeah.
but like you can't just allow yourself to do that, but you need to allow other people to
Yeah.
do that too.
And the cool thing is, the better you get at doing it with yourself, of what I call unshoulding your life,
I
of
love that.
letting go of those shoulds, the more you embrace it with other people. And for me, it's been really interesting to watch in my parenting with Penny of thinking, okay, I had all of these things of what her life would look like. And that I used to say, like, oh, when she graduates high school, oh, when she
Mhm.
graduates college, oh, when she gets married, whatever.
Mhm.
And I've just kind of been like, I'm done saying those things because I don't want her to think this is the only path forward.
Right.
I don't care. Like I want to be there to support her in what feels right for her and to know that I am on board. I don't want her to have to go through that heartache that Steve went through and that I've had in moments of my life. I
Yeah.
don't think it was I don't know if I felt it as deeply as Steve. I don't know. Maybe I have, but just that being so scared that you're not going to be loved and accepted by the people you love
Yeah.
most, that you want that approval from. And I've made it very clear, like, we're here. I don't care what your life looks like. We're here cheering you on. So when you unshould your life, it becomes so much easier to stop putting those expectations on other people
Mhm.
and show up in what I believe is Christ-like love of how we love genuinely and aren't just saying, well, this is how it's supposed to be. This is the only way to live, that you're going to be happy, and recognizing there are lots of ways to live to be
Mhm.
happy. We
Mhm.
don't know.
Mhm.
Like mine and Steve's life together was not our ultimate happiness. Like, yes, it brought us happiness, but it wasn't as fulfilling as the lives we get to have now. Um, and so I think just being able to trust other people as we trust ourselves is huge. And it really does go a long ways.
Yeah. So I was chatting recently with a friend, a longtime friend of mine. We were in high school together and we've kind of kept in touch on and off throughout the years. But we got back
Mm-hmm.
in touch via social media and we talked on the phone. And she just mentioned her daughter and her girlfriend. And I was like, oh, I didn't know she was gay. And she's like, yeah, she's gay. She's like, it was not a big deal
I love
because
that.
she just called and said, hey, I have somebody that I've been dating that I want you to meet. And she's like, and it was a girl. She's like, she didn't feel the need to like make it this big
Mm-hmm.
thing to come out as gay because she said she just knew that we'd love her no
Mm-hmm.
matter what. And so she was like, oh, you're dating a girl. And she's like, yeah, I'm gay. And she's like, that was it. It wasn't this big thing. And she's like, and we were thrilled. Like, we love the girlfriend and whatever. And I just think, like you said, Penny, we're there for whatever.
Yeah. We're
And
along
we're
for the
not
ride.
putting expectations on you of how you have to live your life, that we're just there no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think these parents did for this daughter of theirs,
Mm-hmm.
is that she was like, oh, I can just tell my parents I'm bringing a girlfriend home. And they're like, great, we can't wait to meet her.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I love that. And now I'm not saying from the majority of families, maybe they're going to have different
Yeah.
experiences with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can all learn something from that. Like
Yes.
maybe their kids will feel like they have to make a big deal of coming out, or the parents will have emotions about that, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But can we just be like, okay, this is where they're at, and I'm going to love them no matter what
Yeah.
through all
Well, and
of this?
I know people who their kids, like you're saying, like with your older kids who have left the church or whatever, who are no longer active in your church. Like that's a form of coming out of like, how are my parents going to react?
Yeah.
And do I need to make a big announcement or is this just something that slides in? And that's different for everybody. And it's okay either way.
Mhm.
I have friends who are like, I'm going to drop out of college and I know my parents are going to be devastated and they're
Yeah.
scared to death to tell them. And it's like those things I never want my kid to be scared to tell me anything. Like, let's go. What is it? What are you feeling? And so
Mom,
that's like my one goal.
I'm a Republican, or mom, I'm a Democrat,
Yes.
like
Like it's just,
some people I know that's huge, like in their family.
yeah,
It's a big, huge deal to be a different political,
hmm for
persuasion than
sure.
their parents or whatever. And so there's lots of things like that,
Lots of things. Hmm
that how we get to choose how we respond to things
Yeah.
like that with our kids.
And how we lay that foundation
Hmm.
of releasing what we think is right for our kids, for our friends, for whoever in our lives, to say, oh, well, maybe a different path is right for them. My path's been different, so maybe theirs is too. And that I don't have to push one way on them, that I can be excited and open to whatever comes.
Hmm. And they're
Yeah.
exploring this, and I can be supportive of
Yeah.
that. So I love that. Um, I have a question in my mind. I'm just trying to formulate it so it makes sense.
I know how this goes.
Um, okay, so this big thing like shifted your life. This big plot twist happens
Mhm.
in your life, and like obviously you are okay with it now. How did that impact your feelings, like telling other people this? Like, was that difficult to tell your family, your church members, was that difficult?
For me, no.
Okay.
Obviously, I was trying to be sensitive to Steve and what he needed at the time, but we were just at the point where it's like we have carried this alone and in
Uh-huh.
private for so long
Uh-huh.
that, like, let's try something different and see how this feels to just own it. And again, Steve was so scared and all of those things, but obviously was out being true to who he was created to be. Like, let's own it. Like, it's going to feel better to own it. And so we just started telling people and just owning that. And I'm very much of the mindset that no matter what I do or say or how I dress or whatever, somebody's going to have an issue with it in my
Mm-hmm.
life. Somebody, I don't care if it's somebody I've known for years or somebody who sees 20 seconds of my story on Instagram, they're going to have an opinion. And it doesn't matter. Ultimately, what matters to me is how it feels to me and how it feels to my family. Like, obviously, I'm going to respect sharing things that with, the other people are involved in. But we just went for it and just were like, there are other people that we know are going through these things. There are other people going through lots of other things that they are scared to say or do. So, what if we just say it and create a space for others to do the same? And that's kind of how I've just lived my life is this is who I am. These are the decisions I'm making. If you're not on board, you're not my people. And that's okay. And I think like when you brought up picture perfect families, like Matt and I, when we'd go to church when our kids were little, none of our kids really go to church anymore, which is fine. But we have 3 kids between the two of us. And I remember just showing up at church and we looked like that little picture
Yeah.
perfect family.
Right.
And we were, but it was not the story that people were envisioning in their heads.
Yeah. Right.
And we would speak up about that. And we still do in church meetings and different things of what our journey's been like. And it creates so much safety for other people, whether they express that or not. Like, I know how many lives that touches by people just knowing they're not alone in not being perfect or what
Mm-hmm.
they should be
Mm-hmm.
or any of those things. And so there's just, for me, it was not just a liberation of ourselves, but also an invitation for others to come join us and to embrace those things. So that's, for us, it felt easy. I mean, obviously, like, I'm
Relatively.
not saying
Yeah.
it was, yeah, relatively, of like, this is the best decision for us. It might not be the best decision for somebody else. It might need to be a slow burn, but I refuse to have shame around my story. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to carry shame. I mean, I've been through all sorts of things with Matt that are just, it's been up and down and all over. And I left him at one point and all these things. Like, it hasn't been an easy road, but I'm not going to carry shame around that because I know there's somebody else carrying shame around that and they need to know they're not alone.
Yeah.
So that's been our path and journey. And obviously, we've shared that far and wide at this point, but um, I know it can be hard and it's scary and you do lose people along the way. They aren't your people.
Yeah. Right.
Like, that's just all it comes down to is these weren't people that really loved you for you, and therefore they're not really people you want in your life.
Mhm. Well, well, I mean, shame needs secrecy and darkness, right?
Mhm.
When we bring it to the light, it's amazing. Like, we've had our own struggles, and some of them I can't share super openly because they're my kids' stories, right? Like, they're my kids' stories, but
Yeah.
I can tell my part of the story. And every time I do, whether it's on Instagram or whether it's to a trusted friend, that burden lifts. It feels
Yep.
less weighty, less heavy because I've now shared it and they can help me carry it. And I think what you're saying is so profound because the the heaviness of shame is, oh, it's crippling.
Yeah, it
It is
is.
absolutely crippling. And, I know of human beings around my age who are still closeted because they don't dare come out because of the shame and because of the people around them. They're like, I've heard them say things, I've heard them, and it just breaks my heart. And also, it's a message to everyone who's listening to this that be careful what you say. You never
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
those people who you love are dealing with inside and carrying inside and the shame they're feeling. And so I love, because it is so true. I mean, when I've been in church meetings or um conferences or whatever, and somebody is vulnerable with their story, I'm like, oh, I can speak
Mhm.
up too. I don't need to
Yeah.
feel the shame for my story. We all have our stuff,
Hmm.
and we
Yeah.
can open up and share that, and it's going to help somebody else.
Yeah.
And your story is helping very specific people, but also like it's helped me too.
Hmm.
That's not my story, but it's helped me too, like be able to speak up more and release some of the shame around my own story. So I just think it doesn't have to be the exact situation. Now, have you
No.
helped people in your exact situation? 100%. So many people, but it helps all of us who are carrying deep, heavy things in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it just shines a light of hope that
Uh-huh.
like you can be happy and not follow this one path or
Hmm.
this one way. The one way you envisioned your life would look, whatever that way it is, you can still have happiness and joy and peace and love for yourself and others with all of that. And like thinking back to what you were just saying, I think about our values, like when we know what it is we actually value, and some of those do come from the way we were raised, and some of them are put on us, and we realize, oh, I don't really value that. But like two of my greatest values are, like you were saying, family. We value family. I'm like, I value family so much that these are the decisions I made so that I can still have a family
Right.
that shows up, that my daughter still gets to have this love. Well, some people think it's like, oh no, you didn't value your family enough because you gave up or whatever. And I hear that all the time. And I'm like, that's fine. They can see it that way, but I know why
Right.
I did it this way. And
And
that is
that's
all
the
that
key.
matters.
That's the
And
key.
also, that's the
I feel
key.
it. Yes.
Yes. Um, and then the same thing with like, I love the way I do and share the way I do because I want to love as I believe God loves and Christ loves. And so for me, that is one of my values. And so love is the highest thing that I carry in this life. And I'm like, how do I show love for myself? And then how am I showing that for other people? I never want anybody to feel scared to share with me who they are and what their
Mhm.
story is.
Mhm.
And that comes from genuine love for myself and other people.
Well, and for me, that has come as I have struggled.
Yep.
I mean, that amount of love and acceptance wasn't necessarily there when I was younger, but it's happened as, people that I love or my kids or other friends or whatever have different paths and are choosing different things, or
Yep.
I'm out as gay or transgender or whatever. And I'm like, I have a decision to make. Do I want this relationship in my life? Because
Yeah.
how I act and believe and love them will determine if I get to have them in my life. And I want those people in my life. And so I better expand my heart. I say my heart has been broken open so many times that it's just getting more and more capability to love. And I think
Yes.
that's the thing with life is if we allow those really hard things and those disappointments and those lost expectations and dreams or and whatever, whether it's your family or job or whatever, if we allow those to break open our heart, it gives us such a bigger opportunity to love. But we have
Oh my
to
gosh. Yeah.
intentionally make that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, love is expansive, and that is the thing that I have learned more than anything. Just as like when you have more than don't have more than one biological kid, but I've watched other people do it. Like your love expands for those kids. It doesn't change how much you love the first one.
Right.
It just grows for to
Right.
love the second one. And I've watched that like with my stepkids and all of those things. I have a quote on my wall, and I think it's from C.S. Fitzgerald. This says, uh love love comes in all forms, but never the same love twice, something along those
I
lines.
love
And I'm
that.
like, it's so true. Like we get to love in so many different ways. I get crap of people saying your poor husband because you are still have this relationship with your ex-husband. I'm like, no, my husband knows that this is a very different relationship of love
Right.
and support. um, and I get to love both of them in very different ways, and it's not the same, but there's just it's amazing how much
It is
love expands.
amazing.
Like you're saying, like I just can't get enough of it. I think once you start seeing that, it's like, let's go, like bring it on. I want all of this love that I can get.
Yeah. I just this thought just came to me. There's a phrase that's used in scripture that you and I grew up hearing called a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And I'm like,
Mm.
maybe that broken heart is the key to becoming more like Jesus that, you
Oh,
and I
sure.
believe in, and whether you believe in Jesus or another thing, but I think love is a universal value, no matter what religion
Yeah.
you believe in. And I think that broken heart is the key. It
Mm-hmm.
just like that thought just came to me, like that broken heart and that humble spirit is the
Yep,
key to opening our heart and loving people more and loving ourselves more, really.
for sure.
Like you
Oh,
said, it
yes.
starts there. Starts
Yeah.
there. So
Yep.
anyway, well, Jessica, I could talk to you all day long.
Likewise. We could keep going for
We can
hours.
keep going and going, but I just have so much appreciated your message to people here. And whether you are in Jessica's situation that she lived with how long ago? 12
It's been
years
12
ago?
years now.
12
Yeah.
years. And hopefully people who are in that situation hear this.
I hope
But
so.
even if you're in a different situation, the principles that you've shared apply to all humans and
Mhm.
all circumstances, and kind of the letting go of those expectations and dreams and whatever, and just kind of embracing where we're at, bracing ourselves, and just expanding that love toward
Yeah.
other people. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. Will you tell people where they can find you, what your current project is, etc., so that they can come follow you? Because you've got to go follow her. She's fantastic.
Yeah, so you can find me on any podcasting platform at Your Next Best Decision. That is the name of my podcast. If you go there, you can find all of my past episodes of my previous podcast called Husband in Law, which I hosted with my ex-husband and husband. So it's really powerful to hear it from all of our sides. I think
Mhm,
that there's
mhm.
some power in that. So if you're interested, you can go check that out.
And I
I
love the
am
name husband-in-law. It's just so perfect. Anyway, so
that's yeah.
okay, so the current name of it though is
Your next best
Your Next
decision.
Best Decision. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Helping you gain that clarity after your life blows up, or maybe it doesn't blow up, but you're like, something's off and I need to figure out what that is. I'm here for you. You can find me on Instagram. That is where I'm the most active at Hey Jessica Frew, and you can find me there. If you are wondering how much you are shoulding on yourself in life and want to get clear on that, you can check out my should score quiz. It's like
Mm.
those quizzes you took in the magazine when you were growing up, and it will identify where you are shooting on yourself and how much you are shooting on yourself. You can check that out at heyjessicafrew.com/quiz.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait for people to hear this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.